What's going on, YouTube? It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. We are plugging away on the F100. We are doing inner fenders today. As you can see, that crumpled up pile of crap sitting about right there. That's the old one, or what is left of it. Actually, the driver's side wasn't too bad, which seems to be pretty common on these old F100s, is that the passenger side rots out before the driver's side one does. However, I knew I needed them eventually, and I figured if I'm doing one, I might as well do the other, so went ahead, ordered both. They are painted, and they did not come painted. Had to do a little bit of cleanup on them. Nothing too serious as far as surface rust goes. Was able to get them cleaned up. They had a pretty nasty grease that they had sprayed onto it. I'm sure it was when it was in the dye mold that had to come off. That was a little bit of a nightmare. Dawn dish soap in a bucket, and about 3 hours later, I had one fender about 90% clean. Got mad, went ahead and grabbed some brake clean, and then just sprayed the other one off. Ended up with a lot faster, a lot cleaner result. Just spray it directly on the rag. Don't spray it directly on the primer. Wipe it off. There can be problems with residues from the brake clean staying on there. There's probably a better chemical to use, probably something as simple as, I don't know, any kind of a soft solvent. But anyways, I was getting frustrated with the amount of cleaning that it was taking to prep that up. So got them painted up, primed first, cleaned up any little bit of surface rust that was there. There really wasn't much. I thought it was surface rust. It was actually that grease. It was pretty thick brown looking stuff. So anyways, they cleaned up really well. Good couple coats of primer on there. Could definitely use another coat of paint. These seem to look like every set of inner fenders that I've ever seen, either underpainted or orange peeled like crazy. So either way, these ones hopefully will be going in. We won't be getting that far in this video. I'm going to try to keep this one short and brief. I'm going to try to give you guys the cheat as to how to get these out and quick. Now, I did end up cutting that one to bits. You can see I actually cut this, mangled it up pretty good, so this one's going to have to get somewhat crunched up and smashed in the garbage can, but that one will be going away. Got a couple of brackets, and obviously the hinge has got to still come off there, and that hinge is still a-okay. They do go bad on these, but I mean, it takes a long time. You may still have the originals on there. But anyways, we're going to try to cheat you guys through this. So in order to remove the front grille, you have a number of bolts. All of them are 1/2 inch. You have a couple of here. The headlight pans have to come out, which of course one ended up on the floor. Luckily that garden hose caught it. But there are 4 little screws in that. 1, 2, there's one over on the side and one right there on the bottom. You can see that hole right there. Both of those come out. There is 1 bolt behind it coming from this side into the front of the fender. On the bottom you have 2 bolts coming through the back that will release the front grille. And then you have a couple of the inner fender bolts, which we're already doing inner fender bolts that have to come out in order to release that grill. It has little tabs that come right back and mount up. I will show you that grill here in just a minute. I'm actually rather quite impressed with this header panel. I figured I would have to replace it. We do have a couple of spots that are rusted through, and I do believe I broke a couple of bolts. Yeah, this one. So these are actually welded in nutserts into that header panel. So once this fender comes out, I'm going to have to drill. I probably won't even drill. I'll probably just cut the whole thing out and weld in a new piece. Is more than likely what will end up happening. If I can salvage it, I will, as this is I think these are 250, 260 was the cheapest I found for that entire header panel, and it may have been more like 300 or 400. So if I can salvage it, save it, and clean it up. I did buy a bunch of white vinegar. I'm going to be using that to try to strip some of the rust. I'm not sure how it's going to affect the paint. Eventually, I do want this a different color. One of my father's favorite colors. That was the reason we initially painted it red, and I knew it was going to do exactly what it did, and it pinked on us. It faded and started to turn pink. I may be able to sand it down and get some fresh clear coat in some spots, a good wax and polish, and a lot of this will actually clean up. But I mean, we were on a limited budget when we initially restored this, so there was a lot of stuff that was missed. So we did get a lot of the rust on the outside, but a lot of these panels are rusting from the inside out. I do believe these are the original fenders. I don't believe those have been replaced. However, we do have your typical rot holes here and there, stuff that just needs gone over and worked through. And this is going to be a long project. Hopefully one day I'll have the money to pay somebody to do the body work on it, but all in good time. But your inner fender bolts come from the other side in. You have a number of them, and they are very readily accessible through the wheel well. I was able to use an impact little driver with 3/8 half inch on there, and was able to rattle a lot of them loose. I did end up breaking some, which I was rather quite impressed with. As few as I did break. Some of them I did end up having to take a grinder to and cut them off, which was not pretty, but I mean, it is what it is. These panels coming out of the cab actually don't look to be too bad. I mean, there is some scaling rust in here. Sorry, of course I'm watching my hand and not the camera. There is some scaling rust, but hopefully I can soak that in some vinegar and maybe get a lot of that out of there. I'm not too worried about how much rust is in there as far as structural integrity. Really not too bad. I've seen much worse on newer cars, so not too scared with that. A lot of this will hopefully get sanded down and cleaned up. The one thing to kind of be cautious of, especially on these older ones, is lead dust, even rust dust. On a newer car that doesn't have lead paint in it is toxic, so make sure you've always got at least some sort of, at a bare minimum, a dust mask. They don't stop viruses, but they do stop dust very, very well. And even with that, you may even need a proper N95 mask to actually properly prevent just the lead particles that come out of that paint. So this color is actually the original. I believe that does say brown, but it is painted. It's not stamped into it, so I believe that is the original color that was on this truck. So that definitely is lead-bearing paint. So I'm going to try to strip this as hazard-free as possible. I'm hoping some white vinegar will do some damage to that, and I'm obviously going to start in a lot worse place. This cab mount realistically needs to be cut out and replaced out of the cab. It has been done before. You can see down here, they look like they're decent welds. I mean, they definitely held even through all this rust. You can see there it is right there. That's the old weld that was done. So a lot of this was patched in. I do know this truck was rolled a number of times by my aunt, and wouldn't be surprised if some of the uncles rolled it a time or two as well. Still haven't got all those stories out of the old timers yet, but eventually, hopefully, we will. As far as the rear fender goes, mounting to the cab, there's only one spot. There is a little rubber piece, almost looks like a chunk of a tire, and there's but just 2 bolts into the cab and 1 bolt through. And this one was so corroded, I knew there was going to be no way of stopping it. And trying to get access back here, I ended up cutting it because this sits on the inside of that inner fender, and so it was metal fender here and the back of the nut here. And so I just zooshed it off real quick with a grinder, and away it went. So still got quite a bit of cleaning up to do here, stripping, see how bad we're all going to be, but yeah, just the one down there, and then you have 1, 2, 3 up here, and then your obvious fender bolts up here that come across. As far as removing this, I was struggling to get to these two. You can see my attempts at even hitting them with WD-40, but these are the lower 2 fender bolts that bolt through the back of the fender in, and I was struggling to get the fender off, especially because there is a big 5/8, no, it was a 9/16 bolt down there that sits in the bottom of the fender. I went to crack that loose, and the entire fender rotated with it, and I went, nope, I'm done here. So soak that one down in WD. Hopefully good things happen. They may not. This fender, I believe I'm just going to have to replace. You can see where there are still some spots that are still primed, but we are just rotted out in a lot of places, especially down towards the bottom. I could cut it out. My biggest issue is I am not a body man by any means necessary. I can replace panels that are painted, but that's like aligning fenders, aligning doors, that is not my forte at all. Could it be done? Absolutely. Would it shut without banging? Probably, but the lines are going to look like garbage. So anyways, we're trying to keep this one somewhat budget friendly, trying not to break the bank. We could very easily dump $200,000 into this truck just to get the cab where it needs to be, and I don't have that kind of money to do that immediately. So we're going to be going through this slowly. I'm going to try to get the front of this cab cleaned up first. Once we get this other passenger side fender pulled out, this one I'm hoping will come out a little bit easier with as rotted as it is. I still have a battery tray and a bunch of other heater hoses and stuff that would probably be better to at least move out of the way, if not just disconnect. And then the big issue is going to be not snapping off those heater core ends. I'm not familiar with replacing them on these, but I do know that dashboard in there is shattered and will come to pieces in my fingertips. So anyways, Same thing, we got a repeat over here. WD-40 is your best friend. Some of these, as I was saying, are J-clip style, so I will have to get replacements for those and new bolts for some of these that snapped. This one had to be cut. You can see there was just no getting him out. He was so bad, rusted together. He was starting to actually damage. And this one you can actually see where just with the impact, just sitting there and hammering back and forth on it was actually beginning to cut the fenders. So was able to get lucky with that one and was able to stick a ratchet on it and work slowly, just manually turning it instead of the hammering effect, because sometimes that hammering effect, if it's a little bit weaker, it will cut the metal versus rattling the rust out and breaking the bolt loose. But I'm gonna go show you guys the grill. As you can see, we have plenty of access here. Really wasn't too difficult. The biggest fight, again, was just rust, corrosion, and then finding all the hardware. So on the grill, this is looking from the front of it. This is where one of the bolts was that goes into the corner of the fender. I'm going to try to turn this over delicately. One right under the center. Two right up here on the top. So there are, in the very top, one. And these are coming from the back side again. So these are coming from inside the header panel. And then there's another one back here. You can see him. One down there, right next to your turn signal indicator. Another one over here on the opposite side. So really only 4 that are hidden behind the grill that actually come from the other side. This will kind of help you locate them. And then there are 2 on the back side of this that you can't actually see. These are inside that inner, or inside the fender. One, and there was another one, oh, right there, up there, 2. So overall, not too bad. The electrical connectors, if they are still stock, this is going to be like a relay style plug. You just pull it straight off. This is one of the ground wires. This is just one of those very simple, just pull it apart to disconnect it. And as is this. Very, very simple to pull out. Not difficult at all. Yeah, you can see this is some of that was the inner fender piece that sits right here. I absolutely mangled it. And this is actually incredibly thin steel. Like, this is not difficult to cut with a very simple pair of, I'm sure everyone has a throw around pair of those. I think I've got 2 or 3 around here, and I can't quite seem to get rid of them, and then when I do need them, they do incredible work. So it's not a very often tool that I use, but it's very beneficial. But we do have a good amount of rust, a lot of dirt in here. This is actually sounding a lot better than I thought it would. Like, there's still good steel in there. Definitely we're going to lose a little bit of it just cleaning it up. And then got another J-clip right here. Let's see if I can get that without putting you guys in the sun. It's got to get pulled out. Now once they're at this point, these are very easy to remove. You just have to get a flathead screwdriver and bend this open and then push that in, and this will fall right out of here. So once they break like this, not such a big deal. In fact, I prefer them to break than let them round, and have to actually come in here with a grinder and cut these off. It's quite the fist fight. Be careful if you're doing that. A smaller blade or a skinnier one might do you a little bit better. Just make sure you keep your hands free and don't cut through something that you shouldn't. Watch where you're at and what you're cutting, because you can very easily cut through and nick the harness or a brake line. They'll sit right there, or even a power steering line coming off of your power steering gearbox. Overall, not too bad. I've already run too long on this. We're up to 14 minutes now. Should be seeing another update on this. Hopefully we'll be getting that motor put back together here before too long and getting some of this cleaned up, painted, and at least shoved back outside, flipped around, and brought back in so that we can get the motor put in it. So hoping to have this one done by the spring, at least as far as I really want to put into it so far. I mean, this one definitely needs a lot of money, a lot of work, a lot of cleaning, a lot of restoration, but I fell in love with this one a long time ago. So anyways, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, guys. Have a good one.